And a great Saturday afternoon to our 94.7 FM family. We are so glad to have you guys back in the chat room with us, because when you come back to the chat room, then we get to come back every Saturday and share this hour with you. So we thank you so much for doing that. I am so honored to have my two special guests here today. These people are near and dear to my heart, but we are going to talk about one of those relevant topics that do impact our communities and our world. But before we do, I hope that you guys are taking care of yourselves, just staying safe and doing whatever you need to do to be well. We don't talk about the pandemic that much anymore, but we know we have a lot of things going on around us, and we just want you guys to be well and to be safe. We want to talk about our babies today, our kids, our children. In 2021, the General Assembly passed legislation updating the fourth grade promotion requirements. And that meant that third graders that were not proficient on the spring TCAP testing may not be eligible for promotion to the fourth grade. And that is a concern. Anytime our children's education is at stake, that is a concern. We have just the right people here to talk about that. We have our Tennessee State President, Ms. Gloria Sweet-Love, who is my beautiful cousin. We have Mr. James Shaw, who is former principal, lifelong educator, and what better people to talk about this than these two? And I'm going to claim him as my cousin brother too. So glad to have both of you guys here with us today. Thank you for taking the time to have this discussion.
Good morning to you.
Good afternoon, cousin. It is wonderful to see you as always. Wonderful to be here. And you know, we're always excited when we talk about education, because people don't really like to talk about it or say it or admit it. But without education, none of us would start. So it is so critical that we make sure that, as you said, our babies, we make sure that they are prepared to move on to the next grade and for the world. Coach Shaw he's going to talk about, he always gives a caveat when we start talking about third grade retention. And the fact is that we don't want the standards lowered. We're not sure that our babies get all the help. We want to make sure that the legislation actually is beneficial to them. We want to make sure that it is understood by parents, by guardians, that it is understood and supported by teachers, administrators, and etc. And we have been advocating heavily this year to make sure that the legislature understand that put it out there is not in the best interest of our students.
And so, Dr. Shaw, one of the things I want to begin with is I don't want parents to panic. We know that the law has passed and schools are trying to implement parts of that law even as we speak. The problem in that is many of the legislators, when they voted for this particular law, didn't fully understand what would be happening to school teachers and most of all to students.
Right.
Now, the flip side of that is many people believe students ought to be retained if they are not meeting certain benchmarks. What we say to folks, we're not lowering standards. We're saying those supports ought to be there.
Right.
We need those supports. The funding should be there for the supports. But are you really going to punish an 8-year-old for not having a certain skill?
Right.
At 8 to be done, but according to the research, Tennessee, where I live, should be advocating for pre-K.
Right.
Universal pre-K.
Right.
Fix it before third grade. But somehow the GOP seems to have made up their minds that this is the avenue that we should go down, that we should retain X number of students based on one test. We totally disagree. Research behind it. We tried it in Florida, had to change. We tried it in Mississippi, had to change. And we tried it in Louisiana, had to change. So our thing is give the kids the support they need early and continue those supports. We don't think anybody should leave high school not being able to read. We get it. But one test, that's not where I come from.
Yeah.
And then when I look at children, not about politics, not about money, but about children.
Right. The other thing that really concerned us, it really looked like it was like a knee-jerk reaction, because they really passed it in special session during COVID, when they really were trying to force all of the schools to go back in person. And that's really when it passed. But what we are really, really concerned about is this is results back. We know that 60% of the third graders in the state of Tennessee did not meet that benchmark they were talking about. The other thing is those of us that looked at the test, we know for sure what the teachers were saying all the time. The test didn't have very much to do with reading at all. So you're asking a 8 or 9-year-old who for the first time is now as testing to take a test that is going to determine if they go to the next grade. And what we're seeing right now, and what parents are up in arms about, you've got a lot of kids that are straight A students, have been since their inception in school, that are failing this standardized test. We don't think that's right. We've advocated against that. We're going to continue to push back. We're going to continue to say to legislate what you're not going to give us funds to support. If you give us the funds we need to make sure that there's pre-K universal, as Coach Shaw said, everywhere, that you've got folks to fill those tutoring positions instead of expecting folks that have already had a 10-hour day to stay after school and tutor. If you can show us that, then we can consider that.
So let me say this, and before I move forward, let me just say to the audience, we know that we're having a few technical difficulties with our audio, so you guys just bear with us on that. But just this past week, I was on a Zoom with my grandkids' school, with my twins, who are in third grade going to fourth grade. And they were breaking down, what I found really fascinating was they don't even know yet if they passed. Like, they're still waiting on the test scores. We're still waiting to know if they're going to have to do any of these other things that they put in place, whether it's summer school or or whatever. So like, I just find that to be wild, that a kid has gone to school all year, gotten their grades all year. I mean, I'm an educator at heart. I'll always be an educator. And at the end of the school year, you don't even know if you get to go to the next grade or not. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's the first thing. And then when Coach Shaw and you were talking about tutoring and, all of these things that we've had in place over the years, RTI, Read to Be Ready, Reading 360, all of these things that we've had in place, they really haven't been implemented with fidelity. We know that, right? And like you say, a teacher that is in the classroom all day long, and Coach Shaw and I had this conversation off air, who really even physically and mentally feels like spending another couple of hours, tutoring?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just it's a lot for the kids to bear. I mean, and one of the things that Coach Shaw brought up when we talked off air was what's even going to be the psychological impact on these children if they are retained.
Right. Exactly. But because we know, from, and remember some of our elementary days, and we know the stigma of being, the real deal, what the kids will say, oh, you failed. We know how stigmatizing that is for an 8 or 9-year-old to say, okay, I'm not good enough. I didn't do well enough to be able to go with my friends and, and my classmates to the next grade. And then the remedies, because we also, because our babies are dependent on parent, guardians, or grandparent to get them where they need to be.
Yes.
And what they're saying, yes, they're saying that, okay, if you were approaching to be able to be considered to go to the 4th grade, you have to go to 4 weeks of summer school. And guess what? You've got to have 90% attendance. We know our babies have issues. They are dependent on an adult to get them there. So if the adult doesn't get them there, guess what? If I'm 89% or if I'm 85% attendance this summer, then I can't go to 4th grade. So as we look at all of these things, it's almost like we intentionally went after 3rd graders.
Yeah.
And Dr. Shaw, let me just add this. When you go to summer school, you do 90%, and you still don't make the score on taking the assessment. It's almost like I spent 4 or 5 weeks in summer school for nothing.
Right.
So now, are you talking about supporting me? Are you talking about making sure I pass a test?
Or are you talking
what
about
if I'm not?
I got you? Yeah.
What are we really saying? And then if you look at the research so far, it's saying that the LEA part, the children don't make the gains. They make gains in math. Right. Most of these summer programs will not just be about LEA.
Right.
There'll be some other things happening in those summer programs, and I understand that to an extent. But if the LEA is what we're after, then maybe we should focus more time on that particular subject to make sure these kids are getting what they need. The other side of that, Dr. Shaw, parents need to question, what is it my child is missing?
Right.
If you say I can't read, what am I missing? Am I missing the comprehension? Do I not know the phonemic? Or what is it that I'm missing?
Right.
And a lot of parents just don't know the right questions to ask. Yeah. So again, here I am, the 8th grader, stuck.
Right.
Because an adult didn't know what to ask.
Right.
And that's why we advocate so hard to try to get parents informed about what's going on. I'm going to beg Georgia know about this appeal process and how to go through it.
Right.
So they're dependent upon the school in many instances to do it for them. Now, schools may do it because now schools have to go back and rearrange schedules and make sure they got enough 3rd grade teachers if people are retained, because you're not supposed to have the same teacher.
That's right.
You're supposed to have a level 4 or 5 teachers. We also know in the state of Tennessee, ain't a whole lot of those out there.
Right.
So a child is supposed to have a level 4 or 5. But in this particular school, and we're talking about those schools in those areas that are already struggling, where your level 4 and 5 teachers may not be. Are you going to move some of those teachers to that school to make sure my child has it? We got a whole lot of issues that need to be assessed and reassessed before retaining my child. Now, if it were me, I'd have a major issue.
Right. And we also, most local education authorities do not have that extra funding to put 2 or 3 more extra teachers in there to now teach the kids that we kept behind. So and one, one of our survey people looked at how many millions, almost $1 billion it's going to take if we fail, if we got 2 third-grade classes in one. What are we doing enough things to make sure that it doesn't happen next time? So there are a lot of questions, but let me plug something while we're talking about this. It is so important that parents learn to be their children's advocate, and we give some really good parent advocacy training, teaching parent how, what are the right questions to ask, how to interact with your child's school, how to interact, what is the chain of command, what kinds of things, and what kinds of things you can do to advocate for your child on a day-to-day basis. Something I told my son when he was living in East Memphis and trying to decide where to send his sons, and I told him, the fact that you go show up, not just for parent-teachers conference, but show up at that school often for your child makes the difference. Your child is going to do well in any school there because they know you're going to have to learn is that, okay, I've got to show up to ask the right questions. And our parent advocacy training teaches them what questions to ask, what to do, and how to do it, etc.
So what about this parent advocacy training? Where does that happen? Talk about that. Where do you guys?
That happens because the Tennessee NAACP does a parent advocacy training. We do one several times a year in school systems. We're willing to do one whenever you asked us to do it. We train parents on how to interface, how to do everything from go talk to your child's teacher to really go visit the superintendent, to actually go and talk to your legislators about this legislation or any other.
And if I wanted to do that training, or if I wanted to have that training done, who do I contact? How do I find out about it?
We need to repeat yourself, I think.
Okay, I'm sorry. If I wanted to do that training, or if someone wanted to find out how to get one of those trainings done, then what do they do? Who do they contact?
They need to contact the Tennessee NAACP, and that you can do it by going to our website at TennesseeNAACP.org, and just leave giving us a message that you're interested.
Okay, awesome. One of the things that that Coach Shaw talked
Dr.
about
Shaw
was the fact that, you're not supposed to have the same teacher. It's supposed to be a level 5 teacher. And we have only a certain percentage of those. And this is something else that he and I had a discussion about, and even with that, saying that they're level 5, that's so subjective. That was somebody that evaluated them and said, they are level 5. But we know, if you've been in the classroom and if you've been in the school system, sometimes you get ranked based on who likes you. Sometimes you get ranked, based on so many things that don't have anything to do with your abilities to teach. Right. We probably have some level 2, 3 teachers that are excellent teachers, but maybe somebody doesn't like the way they do things or doesn't like them as a person. So, I mean, the 25% of the level 5 that we're supposed to have in the state of Tennessee, they may not be level 5s.
Well, it's kind of like coaching basketball. If I had Jordan and the people I needed on my team, I'd become a level 5 right away. And then if I had me and Marvin and you, I might be level 2 all of a sudden. So checks in
and with that,
Shaw. But more than that,
But with that, James, we're going to take a break. I think this is a good time to take a break. We will take a break and we will be back in just a moment right here on Doctor in the Chat Room on 94.7 FM. We'll see you in a minute.
Yeah. What, scratch my leg. It's all right. Feel free.
And we are back on 94.7 FM. We are talking to our state president of the NAACP and Gloria Jean Sweet-Love, and to James Shaw, Coach Shaw, a former educator and principal in the state of Tennessee. So there seemed to have been this buildup of things. In 2011, Tennessee passed a retention legislation to address social promotion. Then there was the State Board of Education retention policy in 2018. And then here we are in 2021, which impacted our 2023 students, this retention law that is passed. So there seemed to have been this buildup of things over time. This started all the way back in 2011. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes, ma'am. In the teaching profession, the color line, if you will, we got about 12% of teachers of color. Well, a lot of times the other side starts to cry about students don't care, and we're just passing them along. So that starts to ring in legislators' ears. People start to cry out about, well, this child left school and they can't read. That's why we have this high crime rate, blah, blah, blah. Then you start to get these restrictions. Remember at one time, Dr. Shaw, we were putting most of because the people who were dealing with them couldn't handle the child.
Didn't know how to discipline.
So they couldn't deal with them, so you put a label on them. I've always had problems with labels. When I go to Walmart, I never see a special education line. They have to pay the same price that everybody else pays. I don't like labels put on children. If you start labeling children early, then you're already saying this is the path that you must go down. We are promoting too many kids. Too many kids are leaving school. What is that really saying? Mm-hmm. That's saying that relationship between school and student needs to be improved. Education should be about your growth. And we keep trying to put people in boxes and won't let them grow. My thing is, with all the legislation that we've had about third grade retention, we finally get more money. So now they're saying to you, and don't forget that ESA. Mm-hmm. And with ESA, that's public charter. All of a sudden, public schools look like we're not doing anything. Well, you are a graduate of public school education, and here you are, Dr. Shaw, Jean Sweet-Love, James Shaw. I believe in public education, but there are many who do not. Right. So when you start following those kinds of things, and I got to plug Project 1619 in here, when you really study the history of public things that seem to be attacking even what we do. Now, right. If you remember, our governor's friend said, where in the world do we get these teachers? They must have gone to some of the dumbest universities, which kind of teed me off, but I'm a church person, so I'm not going to cuss on your show. We have some excellent teachers who work very hard. I think what we are missing is that relationship that we go with kids in terms of getting them to perform. Talk to a teacher this morning. The person told me the teacher is not good with adults, but she's getting excellent results with her students because they know the lady cares.
Right.
We're missing some of those things. Kids usually will perform for teachers they like or teachers they respect. So we're missing some of that, and we're missing it, I think, big time in third grade now. But these laws about if I give you more money, I'm going to require more of you.
And the other thing, Dr. Shaw, I think is so critical that our listeners understand is that we've got to have involvement. Our pastor brought something up in the last week or so, is that the churches have got to take their responsibility of trying to get young people back and get them involved. Young people in their Sunday schools, we see them performing excellent because they've got support. You might not have that support at home. Your parent might be working 2 or 3 jobs. You might be living with grandmama and grandmama is too busy, but you've got that support at church and you've got that larger family that loves you and cares you and encourages you. And so we've got, we've got to deal with the whole community as we look forward to trying to help.
So let me just say,
we've got to have the mission, every one of us.
Mm-hmm. Let me say this, back to I say this to Representative Shaw all the time. All these beautiful church buildings that we have, all of them ought to have some community component. And right. Every last one of them ought to have something for children. Something for children during the school year, not just during the summer, during the school year, right. All year long, there should be something for children. If we as a community in our churches, I mean, think about the civil rights movement, the churches were huge. In that process, right? We got to get back to that. We have to get back to that. Exactly. And, when you talk about the parents working 2 jobs, it's not always that parents don't care. It's not always that parents are irresponsible. I wish I could remember when I read the Tennessean article and when this Tennessee retention law was being passed. And one of the senators or legislators or something said, if parents don't want their children to be retained, then they ought to be reading to them this summer. And I thought, really?
I got 3 jobs. Where am I going to get reading time?
Yeah, like we have so many latchkey kids. And yes. when you're thinking from a privileged perspective, it's so easy to say things like that. And I thought, what a very insensitive thing to say.
And just think about it, Rhonda. Many of our parents work in companies where there's a 2nd or a 3rd shift.
Right.
And we're not the supervisor, so we can't take off when we get ready.
Yeah,
we got to go to work while you take off and go read to your child.
Right.
We miss some. I love when you said from a privileged perspective.
Right.
And so many people have that mentality that we forget. These people are doing the very best.
And it really happened with this law and that legislation they passed in that special session. The average child of a working parent or 2 working parents, a parent that worked 12 or 14 hours, because from a privileged perspective, you work 9 to 5, you go home, you can take off in the middle of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, from the reality of working class folks, you can't do that. And maybe you're like what I used to miles away. So that, if you take off, it's going to be almost a half a day. Because by the time I drive from Jackson to Brownville to visit the school, then I've missed 3 or 4 hours.
And also, maybe also my children have to read in the textbook about Europe, and maybe yours get to experience Europe in the summertime. There are a whole lot of disparities and a whole lot of differences that we could actually bring up.
Exactly. So, but one of the things we are asking, we want to say to parent though, get involved with whatever time you got. If you get involved with us, so we can teach you how to advocate. Maybe you don't have much time, but take a few minutes and go and let your child's teacher know that I am concerned. Don't have a lot of time. I'm running today, to take the second job, but I want you to know whatever I can do, let me do it. And it's okay to ask for help. You know, it really is. And you know, and we need to be, and there are a lot of folks that can help. One of the things we've talked about, and I pray we'll be able to launch, is we're talking about doing Wakanda Academy. A Wakanda Academy, where we really teach children about Black history. We really spend the time with them tutoring. We really take them on field trips. We really do some things for them to make them, you know, be more well-rounded. And for all children, you know, it's really bad that when I think about my oldest sons tease me about Jason being a privileged child because he came along later. And when there was only one kid, hey, you get ready to go to New York, you can fly them with you. Whereas when it was three of them, it is more difficult. But privilege does make a difference because you see some things, you learn some things. You know, when you've been to Washington a couple of 3 times, you know, as a little kid, 6 or 7 years old, going into the White House, you know, you learn some things. You learn to think about some things that if you've not been anywhere but downtown Bolivar or downtown Brownsville, you don't know.
Right. That's right. I want us to talk about, like,
Dr. Shaw, I would also like to add that in terms of that, you just think about it. Parents have got to understand you can't outsource your children.
Nope.
They still belong to you.
Right.
And while I think public education is a great place, still can't outsource them.
Nope.
Yeah. You have got to stay with them, even when they get in middle school and hide. Right. If you come to school, right, you have got to stay involved. You know, she's going to make sure things that they need, they get.
Right.
So we, again, she's already said it, we appeal to parents to stay involved because the way the laws are being set now, if you don't, they're going to miss out on so many opportunities.
Right.
And, you know, when you guys are talking about the academy and all of that, you know, and we talked about the churches and the role that they could play, you know, maybe some of these parents that, because I bet you there's some parents that really cannot find the time probably almost anywhere, you know, working 2 and 3 jobs. I can't even imagine working 2 or 3 jobs. But maybe that's the role that we can play. Maybe there can be people assigned to children that don't have anyone, or maybe that has an older grandparent that really wouldn't understand if they did go, wouldn't understand what questions to ask or how to communicate, you know, with the school, the principals, the teachers, or whomever. You know, maybe we can step in and have some folks, you know, that can go in and advocate for these children. If we are going to take, and James and I talked about this, if we are truly going to take a wraparound approach, then it's going to take a whole lot of different arenas and areas that we're going to have to step into play. You know, it's going to be mental health, it's going to be discipline, it's going to be whether they have some home needs at home, all kinds of things. And we need to put some people in place to help our children. We do. And I'm not trying to make this a black and white thing, but it's our Black children that suffer. It's just, it's a reality.
It is. And, you know, one of the things, because we've been offering our services, I've got just an excellent education team, and they're just fantastic. But we actually went and sat with one of the juvenile judges, and because we know that they are having a lot of truancy issues, and to talk to them about how we might be doing. And what we're really finding out is that a lot of parents have children with special needs, but they are ashamed to say, my child has a special need. So parent training is so important, because we want to make sure having a special need just means maybe I need to be read the question instead of reading it, you know, maybe I need to give my oral answers instead of a written answer. And we just got to make that they understand what we need to be doing is doing whatever's necessary to make sure our children get what they need to be able to function in this world.
We've got to teach our parents about the 504 plan, where our kids can stay, where they don't have to be stigmatized. They can stay in the classroom, right? And get those special modifications that you talked about. Maybe 10 questions as opposed to 20. Sit in the front of the class closer to the board, or, like you said, read the questions, whatever it takes. Because I've had students, I'll even use my own son as an example. Alexis and I would work with Ronnie, and we would help him study for tests, and he could regurgitate that information to us. But getting it from here and on paper, I don't know if it was test anxiety or whatever it was, but it wasn't that he didn't know it. It wasn't that he didn't know it. It wasn't that he couldn't read, but he did not test well.
Right.
Yeah.
So back to what an old principal told me, we can make potato chips look like each other. We can make cookies look like each other, but children are not those kind of products.
That's right.
Every last one of them have potential, God-given talent.
Yes.
And we as educators need to be able to understand and work with the individual child and stop trying to press them out. They all look like professors, or they all look like mechanics. We have to work with those kids on individual basis. And that's all good teaching really is. A good teacher, just think about those people who had 8 different grade levels in one room.
Yeah.
Think about that, Shaw. And they were able to use the 8th grader to teach the 2nd grader how to read.
Exactly.
So good teaching doesn't necessarily have to be that loves children enough to say, James Shaw, he's reading a little slow, but Gene Sweet-Love can really read. Let's put those two together and let them work with each other and help me grow. Don't retain me. I'm 6'5", 250 pounds, still in 3rd grade. What are we doing?
Exactly.
I walk in there with my bass voice, and everybody's wondering, well, what is James still doing in 3rd grade? The old professors, the old teachers had so much knowledge about helping kids, and I guess that's why I do what I do. It's about children for me. I know we spend millions and billions of dollars,
and I'm glad you said that.
I want to grow the child.
I'm glad you said that. Before we go to break, I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about Mr. Joe White. I was thinking about Miss Curtis. I was thinking about Miss Rivers. Now I'm talking about my elementary, school teachers. Don't get me started on when I got to
I won't date us.
When I got to junior high and high school. But I remember Mr. Joe White teaching multiplication, and after I became an educator, I was like, this man was off the charts. He was such an excellent teacher. I wouldn't have known that in the 3rd grade, right? But he was such an excellent teacher. And some of the things that I see teachers going viral on now, like rapping the multiplications. Joe White did that when I was in school, when I'm 57. I'm telling you, we've had some great teachers. I've had some great teachers. We've got great educators. And, like James said, it's not a cookie cutter thing. And we've got to figure out how to make this thing work and get our kids where they need to be. We're at a break. We'll be right back, guys, in just a moment, right here on 94.7 FM. And we are back. We are talking about 3rd grade retention laws in the state of Tennessee, talking about those things that would make your 3rd grader eligible for promotion or not eligible for promotion, and those things that you can do if you find out that, in fact, your child has not been proficient on this particular portion of the TCAP test. So let's talk about the test, Coach Shaw. Let's talk about that. And then let's talk about what parents' thought processes need to be at this point. What should we be thinking?
Well, by now, Dr. Shaw, most schools should have contacted parents if their child is either be retained or must go to summer school. If you're not meeting expectations, if you're approaching, I think you have to do certain things. And I can't tell you right now all those things you have to do, but certainly if you're below proficient, you must attend summer school. And you must have a 90% attendance rate. As far as the test, we are being told the test is online. The retake, if you will, is online. You don't have the same number of questions. I think we were told there were 20 questions, and those come back to you like in a day or so.
Right.
So they were to be returned to you rather quickly. Once you get that data, you need to be in contact with the school, be in contact with the administrator and the teacher, because you only have a certain amount of time to get things rolling. Now, I've heard in some districts, they're requiring all the third graders to attend summer school. I don't know. It may differ from district to district what has to be done. But as a parent, I need to wait on school to tell me. No. I need to initiate that contact for my child to fully understand every step that I must go through to ensure that my child, if it needs to, well, that my child is promoted. Me personally, I'm not an advocate for retention because I've seen the damage that it can do. Right. But if your child is caught in that situation, be sure to find out what's going on.
And let me reemphasize, it is so important for the parent, grandparent, guardian, whoever is in charge of that child to take that initiative, because we know that districts are bombarded at this time of year with lots of things, and they might have tried to call once and might not have gotten you. But if you have a third grader, that parent, don't let your child fail because you did not follow up. It is so important that we go to the schools and find out, okay, what stage is my child in? What needs to happen next? And be real frank with them. If you don't have the capability of doing it online, ask them, can I bring my child here to the district, and can they do it online? We got to make sure that we advocate.
Rather, they can contact us here at, or me here at the NAACP, or my personal email. I know sometimes it's kind of overwhelming. You know, we use all these acronyms in education, and we use all these fancy words. And some people just don't understand. They just go, and shake their head to say, okay, whatever you say. But if you need my help, you can email me at shawjames1956@yahoo.com.
How do you?
It makes a difference when it's your child. So if parents need guidance, we're here to help.
As an educator, as a former educator and principal, James, what do you think about this? You know, just the fact that the kids are going to be in school all summer and not get a real break from school, because that's kind of our that muscle memory and what they're accustomed to. And now they're going to have to go to school all summer, and as soon as summer school is up, it's about time to go back to full swing.
Well, this is what I told my son about my grandson. You make sure that he can read. You and your wife need to be involved and know that that child can read.
Right.
If that child, and I hope schools will do it, I hope it's not the same thing they've seen all year. I don't have a problem with you engaging my child during the summer. I want you to have advanced learning or support learning. If the child is not having a negative a negative result in terms of going. I don't believe in forcing education on folks. It's not education then. But if that child if they can tell me, well, he is not comprehending, his reading comprehension is really, really down. You give me some things I can do to work with that child at home. If that child goes to school, it's a great thing. If not, then I got to make a decision as a parent that I need to do something different for my child. We're talking about children, not cookies, not potato chips,
right,
not tractors.
right.
We are talking about the life of a child.
Right.
When you are when a child has a great teacher, that teacher instills in that child the want to.
Right.
And that's what education ought to be about. Once you want to, you'll do the work on your own. Yeah. So I'm not telling them not to go. I'm telling you to get the research, get the information you need to say, okay, this little boy can read. So I'm not forcing these things on him. If the child cannot, those supports are excellent. I don't know, based on some research we've heard about, the LE portion of summer camp hasn't been effective in raising the bar. The math portion for it has been effective. So we need to know, or I need to know about my particular child, what is best.
Right.
Do you guys know anything about other states' retention laws and, for third graders in comparison to Tennessee? Is Tennessee the most rigorous laws, or do you know about those?
Will you say that again?
Yes. Do you guys know anything about other states' retention laws for third graders in comparison to what Tennessee is doing? Is Tennessee the most rigorous that you know of, or are they about the same?
Tennessee, as you know, recently just pushed it.
Right.
They've had it on the books for some time.
Yeah.
But they gave us a few extra dollars, and now they pushing it more. I've looked at Virginia. I've looked at Chicago. Chicago has done away with the test being the only thing that determines promotion.
Right.
Wow.
People have done this for years.
Yeah.
And we're finding out it just doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
But of course, when you gave me $3 more extra dollars so I can push a little more requirements on you, give us free K. Give us free K.
Right. Right.
That helps to fix this issue.
Right. And what with other systems, other states that have tried it, they tried and they see some initial gains, but then about the third or fourth year, those gains were lost. So it is not, retention just does not work. You got to figure out how to support the students at an early age to make sure they get what they need. Again, we say we want to make sure that every student is reading third grade. But this is not the way to make it happen.
So do you guys think, I like the whole idea when James talked about Chicago. I mean, we find other measurements, other things to measure the child's learning.
Right. And
especially when we can do it based on how that child learns. Because we know, as James said, if the teachers of the past could have, K through 12 kids in one classroom and figure out a way to appeal to all of those different learning styles, then surely if we're doing one grade at a time, right, we can figure out ways to appeal to those children's learning styles and to assess their learnings in different ways, because it's not a cookie cutter thing. This standardized test, that's just what I'm just not an advocate for. I mean, standardized testing, I think I told James that episode of Good Times where Michael was taking that standardized test, that episode is relevant today. you know.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
We already know that standardized tests don't help the student. Matter of fact, it has been shown that it hurts students. So we are not proponents. At the same time, as long as we have it in our system, and we hear some that we might do away with it, that some people have done away with it, and they are actually doing better with education. But I think we have to get, as parents, as advocates, as faith leaders, we've got to get involved with the parent and support the parent as they work to get the best results for their children.
And Dr. Shaw, I think there are so many things in terms of, we talk about students in poverty. We talk about the crisis learning, those students who have been through so much. And, while we're in this thing, we really need to think about the effects that these school shootings are having on our children. I was listening to a guy who's getting 3 doctorates at one time, and he says his child aced whatever the standardized test was, but she and her classmate were playing rock, paper, scissors, and they were playing to say, if there was a school shooting, which one of us would get shot first? So we've got things going on with kids. One of the things I think I did well was listen to the children. Are we listening to the retention failing? Are we listening to young people? We've got to hear the student voices. What's going on with, one of the things you taught me, we need to ask what happened to you.
Right.
Instead of what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah, what's wrong?
Because so much trauma, that was the word I was trying to come up with. Many of our Black children experience so much trauma. And now with even the school shooting, so many of the Caucasian children are experiencing that. But are we listening? When I go to the Hill, I don't know that those gentlemen sitting in those seats are listening to those student voices.
Right.
Because what we know about children is that when they feel safe, when they are comfortable, and you have a person before them that's really concerned about them, they will learn.
Yes.
That's what we know. And it doesn't take a genius to figure that out.
Yeah.
So in our school system, a new approach or a different approach to what's happening with standardized tests.
Do you guys think COVID, I mean, we know it impacted everybody, not just our children, mentally and emotionally. We know that. But do you think that there's really a really strong correlation to how children perform in the classroom? Like where our children are with their, reading levels and all of that, were we not already struggling prior to COVID? I think I may have lost you guys for a moment. Are you
We
there?
heard none of what you said.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't hear.
I think yeah. So
frozen.
Do we think that this issue with the third graders and their reading levels, do we think this just happened as a result of COVID, or is this something we've been dealing with for some time? Because we know COVID did impact us a lot, but.
Well, we really think it is something that we've been dealing with for some time. But one of the pushbacks that we used, and we kept one of our talking points on this whole thing as we advocated for some amendments and change to this law, were the fact that these were the COVID babies. In kindergarten, when COVID came, they were sent home. Most of them saying, get all these things on your iPad or on your phone. Some of them did not have internet connection. And we know learning to read really is a very interactive piece. So we know that COVID had that impact. And that was our pushback, that we kept saying all of the things that have happened to these babies, being out of school, being free and not being there at all, or having to use your device to interact with your teacher. All of those things happen to these babies. And now you're going to say, oh, and by the way, we're going to fail you in third grade. So that was one of our pushbacks. But for sure, COVID had some almost unknown effects. I think it is yet to be seen all of the kinds of things that, yes, that will have been because of repercussion from that.
That is a good point. I say that all the time. I say that I think because things happen so fast, the researchers didn't get to do that. They had to do things at such a fast time, from the vaccine, everything. And I think as years go by, I think it will be written in the history books. We will find out things that we never imagined, the impacts of this virus. Yeah. Coach Shaw, you were going to talk, and we have about 4 minutes left. And as you guys talk, I'd love for you to, to kind of wrap up things and highlight those things that you really want to be takeaways for our listening audience.
Well, and there will be those who will say, well, what about Williamson County? What about some other counties who have done well on this standardized test? They'll try to say, well, are your kids not as smart as those? The number one thing about kids being successful in the classroom is the relationship between that child and that teacher. Mm-hmm. Number one, there's not that great relationship between the teacher and the child. Usually the results are not that great. Right. Our kids are real sharp. And parents, I'm saying it to you, do not let people tell you your child is not sharp based on a standardized test. Right. You really need to start to try to understand the education jargon or whatever you need to do, but do not let your child think they are a failure based on one test. Mm-hmm. The psychological effects of that can be really damaging. Do what you got to do. The other thing, I think we are too reactionary and not enough proactionary. Right. In terms of, we got to get up and elect some people who have our views. Yes. Not that hard. Right. We're staying home in Tennessee, and I can look across those aisles, and I don't see people who represent my views. Mm-hmm. Right. But then when I look at the voter turnout, it is awful. Yes. And it's getting worse among the young. Yes. Mm-hmm. So, my legs are not what they used to be. I'm kind of going to the chair, taking it easy. We've got to get young people, young parents understanding that there are people on that right side that are simply not playing. Right. They are not playing about the fear that they have about our children and about where we're going. Mm-hmm. They are simply not playing. Right. And I would tell you very honestly, for all the kids I've taught, all the students that I've coached, stop waiting for other people to educate your children. Right. Don't beat up on a system that never was designed for you to be successful. Exactly. Just being honest. Right. Yeah. And so what I would say now is educate yourself, get involved, and understand what's happening so you can pass it along to your children. We've been fortunate as a race of people to have a few of us go by to school, and then some of us actually went in. So with that, we've got to pass that along now. We got to make sure that we are not depending on a system, and that we are still a proud people. You know, when you and I grew up, while our grandparents didn't finish school, they made sure we did.
Right.
And they made sure we had the discipline and the respect of our elders.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you look at the reading now, Dr. Shaw, African-American teachers are leaving so they don't have to choke the kid. The kids are beating up the teachers.
Yeah.
So we've got to get back to getting them to church and back to saying, yes, you will. I don't care what Miss So-and-so said to you. I'll handle that.
Right.
But you're not going to be sitting there when I do.
Right.
Yeah.
You be respectful.
You be respectful.
Right.
I'll take care of the grown folks side of things. You be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more of that has to happen. And when it does, testing will take care of itself. If it's not going away, children can pass the test.
Right.
They're sharp. Look at the technology they are able to do without even reading a book.
Yeah.
So we have brilliant children, and I want parents to keep saying that to children. You are brilliant, you can do anything, but then take the initiative to understand what the quote system is all about.
Rhonda, as we wrap up, let me say that echo what Coach Shaw said, and let's talk about, if I could say anything, I want parents to be involved. My dad set me on his lap and taught me to read by myself. When I was 4 years old, I could read from the Bible, not just the 23rd Psalm, but wherever you turn. He taught me that. He was not an educator. He was just a brilliant country farmer that loved his children. We can take the time to help our children read. So we got to make our children a priority. That's from parent, grandparent, guardian, church members, our children a priority. We've got to fight for them and allow them to learn.
Thank you both. I'm so glad that we had this discussion, and I hope that there are some takeaways, you know, for our listening audience, and particularly those that have children and grandchildren that fall into this category that we talked about today. I hope that you guys will come back next Saturday, same chat channel, same chat time, to spend this hour with us. I want to leave you with this quote by Dr. Mae Jemison: "Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations. Let's do what we can to help our children move forward in this world, because they are our future." We will see you guys next Saturday, right here on Doctor to Doctor in the Chat Room on 94.7 FM. Thank you. See you then.